Right now, I would like to introduce Joseph Menetski for the next presentation. Joe is the Associate Vice President of Research Partnerships at Foundation for the National Institutes of Health. Again, there is more information about Joe in the biographies that are part of the briefing packet for this meeting. Joe, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. I would like to thank the organizers of the workshop for the honor and the opportunity to talk to you all today. It's really been a fascinating discussion so far. But I'm going to give you my view of what we do at the Foundation for Chronic Prevalent Diseases. And just as a little background, the Foundation for the NIH is an independent not-for-profit that was set up by Congress to support the mission of NIH. So we have to do something with NIH. A large part of what we do is developing and managing large public-private scientific research partnerships. And I'm going to talk about two today, the Accelerating Medicines Partnership and the Biomarker Consortium. Each of these programs is actually a set of consortia that are directed to drive scientific research forward in a completely pre-competitive framework. We have lots of other things going on at the Foundation, but I'm just going to focus on those two today. So I said that this isn't a pre-competitive framework, and mentioned a couple of our partnerships. And normally, if you're sitting out there listening, you think, "What the heck is and why are we doing pre-competitive? Why would that make an important point?" And I don't know about these things, and so what should there be? So we do have lots of other things going on, but I'm going to focus on these. So the first thing I'll talk about is pre-competitive space. So why do we develop our partnerships in the pre-competitive space? Well, this is where the results from all of the research are shared between the members of the team, the partners, as well as the public. The expectation that the whole field will benefit from the basic knowledge, which can be used to improve anyone's efforts in drug development. This is all about, and focus that we have is really about drug development. These programs address fundamental issues in the field that are normally extremely broad and just can't be focused on, they're very broad, scientifically focused, but are focused only on questions associated with drug development. The breadth of these questions that we tackle are too large for any one entity to do on their own. So we can bring multiple stakeholders to the table to design projects that will have an impact on how we fundamentally think about the field and make all the results public. And then when all the results are public and when everything's available, all the partners can go back to their own companies and organizations and do what they need to do in order to use this information to generate approaches that will help patients in need. For this reasons, we don't do projects with a single PI or a single company. We really don't even consider those consortia unless we have at least 3 or more private partners, 2 or more research institutions, and that's kind of the minimum. We've had a lot of programs that have more. I think our current top is 12 different private organizations and 5 or 6 private research or public research institutions, and so these can get quite big, and when they get big, they're not easy. But this is the kind of work we do in order to help get things done in medical research, and we have been actually quite successful at these. And so the next thing I'm going to go into, so that's where the pre-competitive space comes in. It really is, in some cases, sets up the ability for companies to be more competitive, but we don't help anyone in particular. The other questions are around the Accelerating Medicines Partnership and the Biomarkers Consortium. These are related to drug discovery need and risk. As Jason mentioned, risk is really the big driver, or maybe it's the big break for much of what drug discovery goes through. Over the years, FNIH has been building and running partnerships, and we have, just acquired the experience that in identifying what fields need to be addressed through listening to our sponsors and our partners. And the drug development industry has consistently told us from as long as we've been around that they need better understood drug targets and more precise ways to run clinical trials. So it just comes down again to a little bit of what we were just talking about earlier. We don't understand the drug targets, then we have lots of failures. If we can't run trials, we can't even tell if something's going to fail or not. It just you don't get any information. So first, I'm going to start with drug targets, AMP. So the Accelerating Medicines Partnership was started during the discussion between Dr. Collins and several of the heads of R&D and others at the big pharma companies. And the industry leaders realized that they were having many failures in late-stage drug development. And this was because the data that they were using to base early decisions about target choice and how to set things up came from a foundation of incomplete and sometimes not even relevant data. So the science was interesting that they were using, but it wasn't translational. And it didn't translation. There wasn't a translation of that basic science because key data was missing. I also realized, as I mentioned, that identifying the actual biologic target, the protein to make an inhibitor to, the thing to make expressed for a particular disease was not really their business model. And for most of them, what was their business, but still is generating therapeutic to that would influence that target in a meaningful way. So the target identification is not important, but the work to make sure that translates into humans is a perfect space for pre-competitive programs. And so initially, the AMP led to 3 programs: one on type 2 diabetes, one on Alzheimer's disease, and another on rheumatoid arthritis and systemic lupus erythematosus. And these initial programs have been joined by several others. In Parkinson's disease, in schizophrenia, we're working on some others. And there are more in development, including actually those first initial 3 are going into continuations because the teams were very useful. Felt that the data that was coming out was useful. So the programs were developed in teams with both industry, patient groups, NIH, academia, pretty much anybody that had a stake in that space. But it's important to understand that this is a true team science effort, and every member of the team had input on what was in the plan. This is important because the plans didn't include, if the plans didn't include enough interest from industry, they wouldn't get funded because in AMP, 50% of the money comes from industry. But it also had to have interest from NIH and academics because, as I mentioned, half of it comes from NIH, half of the funding comes from NIH, but it also has to fit into the mission of the institutes. And we had to know that it could be done, right? So the PIs and NIH were incredibly important in that. These projects are all designed with milestones, go, no-go decisions that can be acted on. We've had situations where we stopped projects because the no-goes were no-goes. And so these are all aspects of these partnerships that make them available and of interest to all members of the group, and are incredibly are focused on what the group needs to do. So that's a big point of AMP. I think a success story from AMP is what can be seen in the rheumatoid arthritis and systemic lupus studies. The program focuses on understanding the immunological underpinnings of the disease at the individual cellular level. And the program defined a standard to approach for collecting the tissue, for isolating cells, collecting consistent data from multi-omic platforms, and then defined consistent comparable data analysis. And all of that data continues to be released. So again, it's one of those situations where the overarching goal could not have been done by any one company, and even tricky for NIH to do. In both diseases, not only have the teams identified the usual suspects, as expected, but they also did identify new low prevalence cell types that may have a strong pathologic effect on the disease. And so these are now being addressed. So that's in RASLE, but the AD project has generated a set of new targets by standardizing the collaborative analysis of these large data sets from multiple different cohorts. And the type 2 diabetes project has generated a repository of genetic data that's, it's been quite extensive and is now being used to affect translatability in the field. And interestingly, in this case, the type 2 diabetes program actually pointed to more targets that were uninteresting because there's this huge, as it was mentioned, there's this huge understanding of from whole genome or whole genome analysis studies that just were hard to pick through, and so that has actually helped. So AMP has been used to address bigger and better target prioritization for new targets in common diseases. And then the Biomarkers Consortium is squarely focused on generating drug development tools that can be used to enhance the results from clinical trials. This started actually with Dr. Janet Woodcock, many years ago, because the Biomarkers Consortium has been going for about 14 years at this point. But she's pointed out recently that there are thousands of papers each year on biomarkers, but very few would you actually take into the clinic to make a decision with. And she's made the point that there's generally not enough data to be confident about the decision, and there's just too much ambiguity. So as we move to a world of precision medicine, which is exactly what we just were talking about as well, even in the highly prevalent diseases, we need better tools in the clinic, and these tools need to be able to assess who's sick, what the future outcome is likely to be for that person, what drug would work best for them, whether the therapy that they're getting is actually working to expectations. So what we understand from biomarkers is there's not just one kind, and that's a very important aspect of what we need to be thinking about and what the Biomarkers Consortium does. You add on top of that these biomarkers are needed to make drugs and get them through the regulatory process. And so that just level adds a whole nother level of rigor that's necessary. So the decision-making tools is only growing, the need for them. So the approach is similar to AMP. We get a group of stakeholders together. They define what it is that needs to be, where the major advancements would have the most impact, what decision needs to be made, what the specific population and in a drug program is, and that's what they work on. The BC's been working for over 14 years and has started over 30 projects. And while we have done several projects in the biomarker identification space, that's not really where we spend most of our time, nor is it really where we have the most experience. Where we really have experience is taking a promising idea to a definitive tool in the regulatory context. So we have a very close relationship with FDA. They also have members on many of the team, and each team consists of multiple industry reps as well as academic researchers, FDA, foundations. And as I was listening to Russ earlier, I realized that one of the programs that we've worked on for a number of years is in the osteoarthritis area. And this is another one of those extremely prevalent diseases. The only therapies out there are for symptomatic relief. And it occurred to me that the story was similar to AD. It's a huge population. Tens of millions of people suffer from the disease. It starts many years before initial symptoms, deals with a tissue that nobody really wants to work on, cartilage, because it's boring. It doesn't have many cells. It really, so the research base is there's not a whole lot of people working on it. And then the added annoyance that many of the people who have OA initially, only a proportion of them actually progress to something that's actually a serious disease that affects quality of life. So there are some initial strides into the biomarker space, but none could be confidently used in the clinic. The team pulled together groups, and the group of folks who work on this, both the companies struggling to look for disease-modifying therapies, as well as research leaders. And team has taken now several of these approaches to the FDA biomarker qualification program. So that's moving the goal along to help understand those patients who with the highest probability of progressing into a debilitating disease. So, from this, you could see the work from AMP and BC as will continue to have impact. We continue to do this as large collaborations, focusing on the drug development process, and hopefully include from everyone from patients to putting pills in the jars. I guess I want to get 1 minute, if I have another minute, which I'm getting probably close.
We do need to begin wrapping up. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll just stop there and say in conclusion, I think the public-private partnerships can actually help move some of these programs in extremely prevalent diseases because of the ability to share the risk and actually increase the probability for everyone in the space to have a better shot on goal, both from the target point of view as well as from a trial, running trials. And I'll stop there. Thank you.